The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 9, bleeding orange and crimson across the horizon like an open wound in the sky. Long shadows stretched across the empty gas station lot, where a single flickering streetlight buzzed with electric static, its pale glow fighting a losing battle against the coming dusk. The air was thick with summer heat, the kind that clings to your skin and makes everything feel heavy, slow, inevitable. In the distance, thunder rumbled, not from the sky, but from something approaching on the highway, something powerful and unstoppable. She stood there alone, a small figure against the vastness of the evening, her white sundress dirty at the hem from walking too far on roads meant for cars, not children. Her name was Emma, though nobody here knew that yet. 7 years old, maybe 8, with tangled brown hair that caught the dying light and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. In her arms, clutched tight against her chest, was a worn teddy bear with one missing eye and a leather vest someone had carefully sewn onto its small body. Patches and all, miniature versions of the real thing, stitched with the kind of love that comes from late nights and hands that wanted desperately to make a child smile. She'd been walking for 3 hours. Her mother didn't know she'd left. Her mother spent most days not knowing much of anything anymore, lost in her own grief, staring at walls that used to echo with a deeper voice, a man's laugh, the sound of boots on hardwood floors coming home from work. Emma had slipped out through the back door while her mother slept that dreamless afternoon sleep of the heartbroken, and she followed the route she'd memorized from the passenger seat of her father's old pickup truck, back when he used to bring her here on Sunday mornings for gas station donuts and stories about the road. The rumble grew louder. She turned toward the sound, her small hand tightening around the teddy bear's leather vest, fingers tracing the patches her father had sewn there himself. A tiny Harley-Davidson logo, a miniature iron cross, a little American flag no bigger than her thumb. He'd made it for her 3rd birthday, back when the dream was still alive in his eyes, before the sickness came, before everything changed. "One day, sweetheart," he used to say, his voice warm as summer rain. "One day I'm going to ride with the Thunder Kings. One day I'm going to earn these patches for real." The Thunder Kings. They appeared on the horizon like a vision from another world. 7 motorcycles in a tight formation, chrome catching the last rays of sunlight, engines roaring with a sound that vibrated in your chest cavity and made your teeth ache. They moved as one unit, a brotherhood of steel and leather and purpose, their shadows stretching long and dark across the pavement as they approached. The lead bike was a midnight black Harley-Davidson Road King, customized within an inch of its life, pipes gleaming, handlebars high and wide, with saddlebags bearing patches that told stories of 1,000 miles, 100 cities, decades of road beneath those wheels. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She knew these bikes. She knew them the way other children knew characters from storybooks. She'd studied them in photographs worn soft at the edges from her small fingers. Pictures her father kept in a shoebox under his side of the bed, images he'd printed from the Thunder King's website back when he still believed he'd have enough time to make it happen. He'd shown her every detail, pointed out the custom exhaust systems, the hand-painted flames on gas tanks, the specific configuration of mirrors and lights that made each bike unique. And that lead bike, that black Road King with the silver skull embedded in the headlight housing and the lightning bolt painted down the tank, she'd recognize it anywhere. That was Bear's bike, the club president, the man her father had spoken about with something close to reverence. The motorcycles pulled into the gas station lot with practiced precision, engines rumbling down to idle, boots hitting pavement with heavy purpose. The riders were exactly as her father had described them. Big men, most of them, with weathered faces and arms marked with ink that told stories and symbols and script. They wore leather vests covered in patches, their cuts as they called them, each one earned through loyalty and time and trials she couldn't begin to understand. Their presence filled the space like a physical force, commanding respect without demanding it, the kind of men who'd lived hard lives and worn them like armor. Bear dismounted first. A mountain of a man, 6'4" easy, with a gray beard braided down his chest and eyes like flint behind dark sunglasses. He moved with the careful purpose of someone who knew his own strength, who'd learned long ago that size meant responsibility. The others followed suit, 6 more riders ranging in age from mid-30s to past 60, each one carrying themselves with that same quiet confidence that came from belonging to something bigger than themselves. They were laughing about something, their voices low and rough with road dust and diesel fumes, pulling off gloves and stretching road-stiff muscles. One of them, a lean man with silver hair pulled back in a ponytail, noticed her first. "Hey, Bear," he said, his smile fading. "We got company." The group fell silent. 7 pairs of eyes turned toward Emma, standing there in the fading light with her dirty dress and her one-eyed teddy bear and a look on her face that was equal parts fear and desperate hope. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching them with those 2 old eyes, her small chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Bear removed his sunglasses slowly, his weathered face creasing with concern. "You okay there, little one?" His voice was surprisingly gentle, the kind of gentle that comes from men who've seen too much hardness in the world. "You lost? Where's your parents?" Emma's throat felt tight, full of words she didn't know how to start saying. Her fingers traced the patches on the teddy bear's vest again, feeling the careful stitches her father's hands had placed there during late nights when the pain kept him awake. She looked at the black Road King, at the silver skull in the headlight, at the lightning bolt her father had pointed at in photographs, while his eyes shone with something that looked like longing. She took 3 steps forward, her bare feet silent on the warm asphalt. The bikers tensed, not with aggression, but with the uncertainty that comes when something unexpected happens, when the world tilts slightly off its axis and you don't yet know which way it's going to fall. Bear held up a hand to his brothers, a gesture that said, "Wait, let's see, give her space." Emma stopped directly in front of the Black Road King. She reached out one small hand and pointed at it, her fingers steady despite everything else shaking inside her. When she spoke, her voice was thin and clear, carrying across the quiet lot like a bell. "My daddy knew this bike." The words hung in the air between them, simple and impossible. Bear's expression shifted from concern to confusion. "What's that, sweetheart?" Emma's hand dropped to her side, but her eyes never left the motorcycle. "He had pictures, lots of pictures," he said, her voice cracked just slightly. "He said someday he was going to ride with you. He said someday he'd earn his patches and be a Thunder King, and you'd all ride together, and he'd finally." She trailed off, swallowing hard against the tears that threatened to spill over. The 6 other bikers had gone completely still, their casual afternoon energy replaced by something heavier, something uncertain. They exchanged glances, silent questions passing between men who'd learned to communicate without words. Bear knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her eye level, his knees protesting the movement. Up close, his face was mapped with scars and sun damage, but his eyes were kind, truly kind, the way some hard men's eyes never are. "What was your daddy's name, honey?" Emma clutched the teddy bear tighter, her fingers white-knuckled around its worn fabric. She looked at this giant of a man kneeling before her, this stranger who somehow felt familiar because her father's voice had spoken about him with such respect, such hope. When she answered, her voice barely rose above a whisper, but every man there heard it clear as thunder. Michael Carson. He said you told him to come back when he got better. He said you promised he could ride with you." He said. Bear's face went pale beneath his tan. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Behind him, the silver-haired man made a soft sound like he'd been punched in the gut. Another biker, a younger guy with a dark beard, whispered something that sounded like Jesus Christ. Bear's hands, those massive scarred hands that had gripped handlebars through rain and heat and 1,000 miles of asphalt, began to tremble slightly. His voice, when he finally found it, was thick with something Emma had heard too often in recent weeks, the sound of grief, of regret, of time that had run out before anyone was ready. "Michael Carson," he repeated, and the name seemed to cost him something to say. "You're Michael's little girl." Emma nodded, and that single small movement seemed to break something open in the air between them. Bear's jaw tightened, muscles working beneath his beard as he fought for composure. He stayed kneeling there on the hot asphalt, This giant of a man brought low by the weight of a name he hadn't heard in 6 months, a name that carried with it promises unmade and time stolen too soon. When the word came out rough, scrape raw. When did he? February, Emma whispered. Valentine's Day. Mommy said he went to sleep and didn't hurt anymore. But that's not true because he hurt a lot before that, for a real long time, and the medicine made him confused, and he couldn't remember things sometimes, but he never forgot about you. He never forgot about the Thunder Kings. The silver-haired man, Smoke, they called him, though Emma didn't know that yet, removed his bandana and wiped at his face with shaking hands. The younger one with the dark beard, Tommy, turned away completely, his shoulders rigid with tension. These were men who'd buried brothers, who'd stood at gravesides and burned memorial patches and watched caskets lowered into earth. But something about this small girl in her dirty dress, standing in a gas station parking lot at sunset hit different, hit deeper, found the soft places beneath all that leather and scar tissue. Bear's voice was barely audible. He told you about us? Every day. Emma's words tumbled out faster now, like water breaking through a dam. He showed me pictures on the computer and had a whole folder on his phone with all your bikes, and he knew all your road names. Bear and Smoke and Diesel and Hammer and Tommy and Six String and Preacher. And he told me stories about the rides he did, the charity runs and the veteran memorials, and how you helped people, how you were like knights, but with motorcycles instead of horses. She took a shuddering breath. He said when he got better from the cancer, he was going to come find you at the clubhouse, and you were going to let him prospect, and he'd work real hard and prove himself. And someday he'd have his own cut with all the patches, and he'd ride right there. She pointed at the empty space in their formation between Bear's Road King and Smoke's Silver Softail. Right there, where he belonged. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the highway seemed to quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The sun had dropped below the tree line now, leaving them all in that strange purple twilight, where everything looked softer, less certain, like maybe if you reached out your hand you could touch yesterday, could pull it back into today, and fix the things that broke. Bear stood slowly, his knees popping, and turned to face his brothers. They stood in a rough semicircle now. These 7 men who'd ridden together through storms and joy and loss, who'd buried their dead and celebrated their victories and held each other up when the weight got too heavy. Without a word being spoken, something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding, a decision made in the way that brothers make decisions when words would only cheapen what needs to happen. Diesel stepped forward, a black man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and arms like steel cables, a 20-year veteran who'd done 3 tours before he'd found his way to the Thunder Kings. His voice was gentle, measured, the voice of a man who'd talked people down from ledges both literal and metaphorical. Your daddy ever tell you what he wanted to ride, sweetheart? What kind of bike? Emma nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. A Dyna. He wanted a Dyna Super Glide, dark blue, with chrome pipes and ape hangers. Those are the really tall handlebars. And he wanted to put a patch on the back that said Carson because that's our name, his name. And he wanted... Her voice broke completely then, tears finally spilling over, running down her dirt-smudged cheeks. He wanted to take me for rides on Sunday mornings, to get ice cream and see the mountains, and he promised we'd go to Sturgis someday when I was big enough, and he'd show me what it meant to be free, to really be free, and now he can't because he's gone, and he never got to do any of it, and it's not fair. The last words came out as a wail, raw and childish, and utterly heartbroken. Emma buried her face in the teddy bear's worn fur, her small body shaking with sobs that seemed too big for someone so little, grief that had been building for months behind a child's brave face, finally finding its way out in this parking lot full of strangers who weren't really strangers at all. Bear looked at Smoke, at Diesel, at each of his brothers in turn. His eyes were wet now, unashamed, because men who'd lived real lives knew that tears weren't weakness. They were proof you'd loved something enough to hurt when it was gone. My Carson, he said, his voice thick. I remember him. 3 years ago, maybe 4. Showed up at the clubhouse on a beat-up Sportster. Respectful as hell. Said he'd grown up watching us ride through town. Said he wanted to be part of something that mattered. We talked for 2 hours. Good man. Solid. The kind of guy you want watching your back. He came back once after that. Preacher added, the oldest of them at 67, his voice like gravel in a tin can. Bought us around at Kelly's bar, talked bikes and roads. Said he was saving up for a better ride. Said his little girl was going to be 3, and he wanted to have his patch by the time she was old enough to remember. Said he stopped, swallowed hard. Said he wanted her to grow up knowing her daddy was a man who kept his promises. Then he disappeared, Smoke said quietly. We figured he'd change his mind, found a different club, moved away maybe. We see it sometimes, guys who think they want the life but can't commit. We didn't know. Christ, we didn't know. Emma lifted her face from the teddy bear, her cheeks streaked with tears and dirt, her eyes red and puffy, but blazing with something fierce, something that looked almost like anger. He didn't change his mind. He got sick. The doctor said he had 6 months, but he lived for 2 years because he fought so hard, because he wanted more time. He wanted to get strong again and come back and ride with you. But the cancer kept growing, and the chemo made him tired and weak, and he couldn't work anymore, and we didn't have money for bikes or anything except medicine and hospital bills and Mommy crying in the bathroom where she thought I couldn't hear. And he kept saying, just a little longer, just wait a little longer, but he ran out of time. The words echoed across the parking lot, bouncing off the gas station's grimy windows, settling into the hearts of 7 men who suddenly understood the weight of a promise unfulfilled, a dream deferred until it died. This wasn't just about a man who'd wanted to join a motorcycle club. This was about dignity, about purpose, about a father who'd wanted to give his daughter something to be proud of, who'd wanted to be more than just the guy who got sick and died before his little girl turned 8. Tommy, the youngest of the Thunder Kings, wiped roughly at his eyes with his forearm. God damn it, he muttered. God damn it all to hell. Bear knelt again, bringing himself eye level with Emma once more. Honey, where's your mama right now? Does she know you're here? Emma shook her head, guilt flickering across her tear-stained face. She was sleeping. She sleeps a lot now. I walked here because Daddy used to bring me here on Sundays, and he said the Thunder Kings always stop here on their evening rides. And I thought maybe, she hiccuped, struggling for breath between sobs. I thought maybe if you knew about him, if you knew he tried, you could, I don't know, I just wanted you to know he really wanted it. He wanted it so much, and he was good. He was so good, and it's not fair that he never. Chill. Bear's massive hand, scarred and calloused from decades of gripping handlebars and living hard, reached out slowly, carefully, and rested on her small shoulder with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man his size. You did right coming here, Emma. You did exactly right. Your daddy was a good man. We could tell that the moment we met him. And you know what? He didn't fail. You hear me? He didn't fail at anything. But he never got his patch, Emma whispered. He never got a ride with you. Bear was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from Emma to his brothers and back again. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of certainty that comes from men who lead because others trust them to make the right call, even when the right call is the hardest one. There's something you need to understand about patches, little one, about what they mean. These cuts we wear, these aren't just decorations. They're earned through loyalty, through showing up, through proving you'll stand with your brothers no matter what comes down the road. And your daddy? He did that. He showed up when he could. He stayed loyal even when he was fighting his own battle. And he proved, Bear's voice cracked just slightly. He proved he had the heart of Thunder King by fighting for 2 years when they gave him 6 months, fighting to get back to us, fighting to keep his promise to himself and to you. Emma stared at him, her eyes wide and desperate for these words to be true, for them to mean something real. Your daddy earned his place, Bear continued. He just never got the chance to claim it. But that doesn't mean it wasn't his. That doesn't mean he wasn't one of us. Smoke stepped forward, his weathered face set with determination. Bear, you thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah. Bear stood, his hand still resting on Emma's shoulder. Diesel, you still got those spare patches in your saddlebag? The memorial set from Joey's service. Diesel nodded, already moving toward his bike, a burgundy street glide that rumbled even at idle. He dug through his leather saddlebag and pulled out a small package wrapped in black cloth. Inside were patches, Thunder King's patches, the kind they put on memorial cuts for brothers who'd passed, to be ridden in their honor, carried on their final journey to wherever brothers go when the road finally ends. Tommy spoke up, his young voice rough with emotion. We doing a posthumous patch? We've never done that before. We've never had reason to before, Preacher said firmly. But this is right. This is what we do. We take care of our own, even if we didn't know they were our own until it was too late. Bear looked down at Emma, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition, a moment where a small girl's grief met a grown man's regret and somehow, impossibly, began to transform into something else, something that felt almost like healing. Emma, your daddy can't ride with us anymore. But his memory can. His story can. And you can know that Michael Carson died as a Thunder King, whether he wore the patch or not. Because being a Thunder King isn't about the leather. It's about the heart. And your daddy had that heart. Smoke unrolled the black cloth, revealing the patches inside. The Thunder King's rocker, the Skull and Lightning center patch, the bottom rocker that would read a name. But these were memorial patches, designed to be carried, not worn, symbols of brothers who rode ahead into whatever comes next. We're going to ride for him, Bear said, his voice carrying across the parking lot with absolute authority. Tomorrow, if your mama says it's okay, we're going to come by your house with a whole chapter. Not just the 7, but all 32 Thunder Kings. And we're going to do a memorial ride in honor of Michael Carson. We're going to ride to the cemetery, and we're going to leave these patches on his stone, and we're going to make damn sure everyone knows he was one of us. He was a brother, and brothers don't get forgotten. Emma's face transformed. The grief still there, the loss still raw, but something else breaking through like sunlight through storm clouds. Really? You do that? For my daddy. Not for him, sweetheart. Bear's voice was gentle but firm. With him, because that's what we do. We ride together, always. And your daddy's been riding alone too long. The other bikers nodded, a solemn chorus of agreement. These hard men with soft hearts, standing in a parking lot as the stars began to emerge overhead, making a promise to a dead man through his living daughter. It wouldn't bring Michael Carson back. It wouldn't give him the Sundays he dreamed of, the ice cream runs and mountain roads, and the wind in his face with his little girl's arms wrapped tight around his waist. But it would give him something, a place in the brotherhood he'd wanted, a name spoken with respect, a story that would live on in the Thunder King's history, passed down to new prospects and old-timers alike, the tale of the brother who never gave up, who fought until his last breath to make it back to them. Emma stepped forward suddenly and wrapped her arms around Bear's waist, the teddy bear crushed between them. Her face pressed against the leather of his cut as she finally let herself cry the way children need to cry, completely, without reservation, held safe by a stranger who'd become something more in the span of 20 minutes under a darkening sky. Bear's arms came around her carefully, this giant man holding this tiny girl, and over her head, he looked at his brothers with eyes that said this matters. This is why we ride. This is what it means to be more than just guys on bikes. We need to get you home, he said softly, after her sobs had quieted to hiccups. Your mama's probably worried sick by now. Emma pulled back, wiping her face on her dress. Will you tell her? About tomorrow? About Daddy's ride? We'll tell her together, Bear promised. He looked at Smoke. Call ahead to the clubhouse. I want every Thunder King who can roll to be ready tomorrow morning. Full colors. Full respect. We're doing this right. As they helped Emma onto the back of Bear's Road King. The same bike her father had shown her in photographs. The same bike that had represented everything he'd hoped to achieve. And as they fired up their engines with that thunderous roar that shook the ground and made the stars seem to vibrate in the heavens, Emma held tight to Bear's waist and felt something she hadn't felt since Valentine's Day. She felt like her father was close. Like maybe he was riding with them after all. Invisible but present, his spirit carried in the sound of 7 Harleys heading down Route 9 toward home, toward a mother who needed to know her husband hadn't been forgotten, toward a tomorrow that would bring 32 motorcycles and a promise kept, even if it came too late for the man who dreamed it. The little girl had pointed at a Harley, and the bikers couldn't believe it. But what happened next, the ride they would take, the brotherhood they would honor, the healing they would begin, that was the real story. That was the story Michael Carson had started, but never got to finish. Now, his brothers would finish it for him, and his daughter would finally understand what her father had known all along, that some dreams don't die when we do. They just wait for the right people to carry them home.